Hi, everybody, and welcome to Designing Your Research Agenda. Thank you all for being here. If you don't mind dropping in the chat where you're visiting from, which school you're from or which part of the country or world you're from, that'd be awesome. Before we get started, we have a brief introduction to some design incubation things coming from Dan Wong.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Wong, co-founder and executive director of Design Incubation. Welcome to our Design Your Research Agenda 4.1. Welcome to our panelists. Just wanted to tell you a few things that are going on at Design Incubation right now. We are currently open for entries and nominations for the annual Educators Awards competition. That is, there are 4 categories for the competition: published work, creative research, service, and teaching. So please enter. The deadline is December 31st. Please enter and or nominate your colleagues. Oftentimes your colleagues don't think that they are worthy, and you know better, and you realize that their work is very important. So please encourage them through your nomination. We have an upcoming colloquium in February with the annual CAA conference, which will be in New York this year. A few of us will be attending, and it is a hybrid event. But my impression is that it'll be the last hybrid event for CAA, as they are moving towards being more in person. So please join us there. We are planning on doing one final colloquium. We haven't determined the host yet, but we plan on doing that before the end of this academic year. So please watch out for the calls for participation for that. And if you or your institution are interested in hosting a colloquium, even a year or 2 from now, we welcome anybody who's interested. That could either be virtual, much like this event today, or it could be in person. So please reach out. So today I want to introduce my colleagues at Design Incubation, Liz DeLuna, Heather Snyder-Quinn, and Jessica Barnes. Please introduce yourselves.
I am Liz DeLuna. I am a faculty in graphic design at St. John's University, and I am a chair and director of programming of Design Incubation. I'll send it now to Heather.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Snyder-Quinn. I am chair and director of Design Futures for Design Incubation. I'm in faculty at DePaul University in Chicago. To Jess. You're muted.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Barnes. I'm a professor at Kent State University in visual communication design, and I'm a co-chair and director of research initiatives for Design Incubation.
Do you want me to start introducing the event? Okay. So welcome everyone to, this is our 4th iteration of Designing Your Research Agenda, also called DYRA. Jess and I started this, I actually don't remember what year we started it, but it was sort of intentional uplifting and mentorship for people as they carve their way and carve their paths in academia, which, as we all know, can be really hard, really different, really unique. In design, we have a lot of folks that come from different trajectories, from industry, pivoting in different ways. So in this event, we try very intentionally to have a lot of diversity across the people who come and share their work, the type of institutions that they're at. We've had some international participants as well. We've had recent asking for folks from community college. So we're really always trying to expand who we represent here and whose work is shared. That being said, we're always looking for new people who maybe aren't on our, within our realm. So if you know of someone, especially someone who's maybe quiet and shy and humble, and you think it would be great for them to share their work, please send them our way or let us know, because we're really, again, trying to expand and give space for new voices here as well. It's also been like a really a really challenging week for many, and I think all of us this morning were talking about the power of education and imagination. Everything at DI is sort of bootstrapped and done without any money coming in, so everyone who is here is doing it out of the goodness of their heart and their belief in uplifting design in our communities. That goes for our panelists as well, so we just want to thank them for being here today. What else? Jess, what am I forgetting?
I just hope everyone here can sit back, watch these presentations, and be a little bit inspired today, even if you're not quite feeling it. I know it's a whole range of emotions happening just among our panelists here, but hope you're inspired. And one of the reasons Heather and I started this, I think it might have been 21. I think I'm trying to remember when the first one we did. Was that we noticed there was so much interesting work happening in design, and a lot of it is obviously creative works, a lot of it is research, and even within those two realms, there's a lot of different things happening. And so we put together this series to showcase a lot of this stuff, and it also show the diversity of research agendas in our discipline.
Yeah,
So,
and to remind us, we can always challenge the ways we present research, do things in new ways, expanding knowledge, and all of those things. And actually, that's a good reminder that the previous events, which have had amazing scholars and creative practitioners, are all on DI's YouTube. So again, if you know someone just trying to get on a tenure track or start or whatever they're doing, there's a lot of great presentations from previous folks there. I also was just remembering, Dan, did you want to talk about the abstract writing workshop quickly? At least we're like trying to manifest that to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing that we are working on, and we will do a call for participation in the coming weeks. Basically, what we are trying to do is help to facilitate writing of abstracts, both for submissions to our colloquia, but overall submissions for book proposals, submissions to conferences. There's so many opportunities that we have. And we've been finding that people are often confused or unclear about how to write or how to improve their abstracts. Also, just to be able to adjust your abstract to suit the particular venue, whether it's a journal or a conference. And there's so many different ones, and each one has their own agendas. So we'd like to facilitate that. And there's going to be two tracks. One track for very junior faculty who may not even have figured out what their research agenda is yet, but they know what they are interested in doing. And by facilitating and thinking about writing an abstract, perhaps that'll help them. And then others who may have, who are more senior in their positions, but just want to workshop the quality of their work. So watch out for that.
Yeah, and we have all agreed to put our old bad abstracts forth and tear them apart so that nobody feels bad.
Right.
we've all got rejected abstracts somewhere we can share.
Absolutely. And if people in the audience are willing to share with us some of their, the development of their abstracts, please let us know. Join us in helping our faculty.
Okay, let's move on with our panelists, our esteemed panelists. If you could each just briefly introduce yourselves, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the first presentation. Jason?
Sure, yeah. Hi, I'm Jason Alejandro. I'm an associate professor of graphic design at the College of New Jersey.
Hi everyone, my name is DJ Trischler, and I'm an assistant professor of design at the University of Cincinnati's Allman School of Design at DAP.
Hi, I'm Yoon Lee. I am professor of art and design at UMass Dartmouth, and I also teach at Vermont College of Fine Arts.
I was also just going to add quickly, we have the chat set up, so if you have questions as the speakers are going, Jess and I will try to moderate those. And then usually this is webinar now so that our panelists have the stage, but at the end when we enter QA, we will invite folks if you want to join us in the Zoom space for social time and dialogue. Just know that we will open this space towards the end. So yeah.
Okay. We'll begin with Jason's presentation.
All right. Hello, everyone. Okay. Can I move some windows out of the way here? And then we'll get started. All right. Thank you so much to Design Incubation for having me. Thank you to all of the attendees. Thank you for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending upon where you're at. And I'm going to start off just by reading my bio that I submitted, so you have a little bit more context about me. Jason Alejandro is a Puerto Rican graphic designer and associate professor of graphic design at the College of New Jersey. My academic research explores intersections of cultural identity, design history, and critical pedagogy with a focus on how these topics shape visual communication. I'm particularly interested in using graphic design to address social and cultural narratives, including underrepresented communities in design education. My work spans writing, publishing, and visual projects, including contributions to both academic and professional design discussions on identity and collaboration in design practice. I am horrified at how well ChatGPT generated this bio, even if it's somewhat generic. All right, so a couple of things. I do want to start actually with a land acknowledgement. The land where I live and work currently are the ancestral lands and home of the New Jersey Lenni Lenape, also known as Lenape-Hoking. And so I wanted to make sure that it's also the same lands where I teach, which is at the College of New Jersey. I am titling this Connecting the Dots, Networks, Community, and an Improvised Approach to My Research Agenda. I guess the first thing I want to say is, yeah, you should design your research agenda. I think that for me personally, when I got this, when I received the invitation from Jessica, from Heather about this event, first of all, I was really excited and honored to be a part of it. Looking back at the previous panelists and their amazing work, but also, you know, it was scary because my research agenda at times hasn't always felt very designed or planned. And so the first thing I'm going to say is that that's okay. But you know, moving forward, right? I think that I have a much greater amount of intention in what I plan to do in the future than maybe I had when I first started. And that's for a couple of different reasons. The first was that I came into full-time teaching after taking a break from teaching for 3 years as an adjunct or part-time design educator. And I was also coming from full-time industry practice. And then when I started in the fall of 2019, I was really only on campus for a semester and a half before COVID hit. And so that really threw a wrench into, I think, some plans, but also into just the process in general, my research process. Apart from that, I would say I was really plagued by indecisiveness. And I'm sure there are a number of folks, maybe even here in the audience, and I know Heather and I have had conversations about this as well. I just feel like I'm one of those folks who's really interested in maybe too many things, and I found it very difficult to narrow down what I wanted to focus on. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in the following slides. But first, I want to start with explaining why I teach. And for me, personally, it was really important that while I was a student, it was really important for me to see myself represented in my teachers. And that's something that directly had an impact upon my decision to eventually teach full time. And I think it also led to me being at TCNJ at the College of New Jersey in particular. That being said, just to provide a little bit of context here, the College of New Jersey, we are based in central New Jersey, halfway between New York City and Philadelphia. We're considered, I think, medium-sized. I say small because sometimes I speak with colleagues at really big schools and they're like, I think you guys are kind of small, but we have about 7,000 students. The vast majority of those are undergraduate students. We have very few graduate students. We're a public college. So again, this makes us kind of unique. Public universities, we have, Rutgers, of course, here. as the largest and the most well-known, but being a small public liberal arts college is kind of a unique context for me and I think for the school as well. We have shared governance, so faculty are very involved in policy making as well as other aspects of governance on campus. So we do a lot of service, in other words. There's a lot of committees or task forces and things like that, as I'm sure most of you are also familiar with and participate in. Graphic design is a BFA degree. It's a specialization within the visual arts. However, we are not in an art department. So something that is unique about my situation is I was hired into a department of art and art history, but then eventually graphic design was merged with a program called Interactive Multimedia, and we formed a new department called the Department of Design and Creative Technology. So there's been a lot of change at my particular institution in just the 5 years that I've been there, both in terms of administration and leadership, and a number of other things as well, which I think all really, had some impact upon my research agenda as well. We have about 100 majors in the program and 40 minors, and that fluctuates a little bit here and there, but those are some pretty standard numbers. I advise about 35 students, and I teach a 3-3 load. So another change there, I was hired to teach a 2-2 load, and then with some changes in the way that we distribute hours across courses, I now teach a 3-3. All right, support. Again, just to help provide some context, pre-tenure faculty at my institution do have a course release during their first 2 years that this is offered for all pre-tenure faculty. As far as I know, that hasn't changed. So that was one way that I felt supported as I began to do research. We do have access to research and startup funds, and those things can be negotiated. So I would say really keep that in mind. As if any of you are in graduate school or looking for full-time tenure track positions, just know that those are, those startup funds, if your employer or your institution offers those are things that you can negotiate, right? The institution did also offer a program called SOSA, which was supportive scholarly activities, that actually has been kind of, I think, temporarily suspended right now. So, I don't know if that'll come back in the future. I will say access to limited travel funds. There's definitely some funds. It's definitely prioritized for pre-tenure faculty or junior faculty at my institution. But even compared to some of my colleagues that I spoke with at other places, it wasn't, as many funds as I think some folks get. Mentorship. I think that because of COVID early on, mentorship was something that I was really looking for, but that ultimately was difficult to kind of sustain during COVID and being online. And then fortunately though, as we started this new department, I feel like I did find a little bit more stability in having colleagues who mentored me. In fact, colleagues who were actually willing to share their own experiences and share documents and files with me about that they had used and uploaded themselves. Excuse me, 1 second, sorry. And then another thing that I would say was helpful and was very supportive was that I had very transparent disciplinary guidelines as well as a reappointment and promotions document. And so, these are just some examples of that here, but I felt like, from the start, I really knew what I kind of had to do to manage and sustain my research agenda during my time. All right, going backwards, this is where it all started for me. This is actually the cover of a publication that I designed, a research publication that I designed when I was still an undergraduate. And this was for a research project I did with my first type professor, actually, and another student. It was called the Type Project, and we spent the summer researching type history. We had applied for a grant through the school and then gotten it. Did type history and then design a typeface. And then we had to, put all of that, right, document all of that work because we had been given the grant into a publication. And so, little did I know that this would be the thing that kind of kicked everything off. And then I would say that there were some other things that influenced my research agenda. 3 main things that researched them were kind of a continuation of my studies in graduate school. By the time I graduated with my MFA, I had a 3-year gap between when I had started teaching full-time and I had graduated. But I really was able to pick up some of my my research from graduate school, from my MFA, and really just kind of run with that right into the research that I was doing as an assistant professor at TCNJ. And so this was work around design pedagogy, around thinking about the digital humanities and liberal arts, and how graphic design was really centered within that, as well as a thesis document, which was essentially a publication about design educators using their interviews to inform my own perspectives. I would say that there were also unexpected opportunities that came up. For example, one thing that happened my first semester as I was teaching full time was I was invited to moderate a panel, which was run by AIGA New York and the Type Directors Club together. And so that was really helpful, actually, to think about what I would really want to do going into my first year as a pre-tenure faculty member. And then the other thing that I would say was really an unexpected opportunity that helped was being included in the Black, Brown, and Latinx Design Educators book that Kelly Walters wrote. This is the cover of that publication, but being a part of that group, we presented at CAA in Chicago, like right before the pandemic hit. And that also really kind of put me on a trajectory with my research that I wasn't expecting, that it wasn't planned. And so just an interview initially started out, that turned into a panel talk at CAA, and then eventually a book. And then from there, other things happened, other presentations, other panel talks, and things like that. And so that was something that, again, I could not have expected. But a little bit about my background. I was a book designer for 8 years at Princeton University Press, and I often say that time working as a book designer, working in publishing for a scholarly publisher, was kind of like going to college all over again. And I didn't really realize it until I was teaching full time that this would be really helpful. I continued to do freelance work, and I continue to do that today, and that has also helped in terms of creating, of making creative work that I can use towards my scholarship and my scholarly activities. And then a lot of the work that I do now in creating book covers is usually focused on more diverse perspectives, I would say. So whether it's authors from who are non-white, or whether it is topics from Central, South America, Latin America. But now, I work with clients who usually seek me out specifically to focus on these kinds of projects. And so that's actually been really helpful in terms of sustaining a practice throughout my research. One of the areas that I've focused on is Puerto Rican design history and visual culture. While I was in graduate school, myself and a colleague, Laura Rossi Garcia, we were both researching these things at the same time, and we decided to essentially collaborate and combine our research into a publication. These are some images of things. These are publications and posters from Puerto Rico in the mid-20th century from a community education program. And this work was largely, was not really being shared with the design community here in the United States. It's well known on the island, but from a graphic design perspective, it really wasn't being researched that much. And so we decided to create a publication together, a collaborative publication that was also bilingual. And so this is some of the work from that project, which honestly, even though this work was created in 2015, without it, like, I don't know what I would have done for the past 5 years. There was a renewed interest in the work, and this was a publication where Laura and I were writing essays. These were translated into Spanish. We were designing this. Laura designed the typography that was used, the typefaces that was used in the publication. And so it became a very important part of my research agenda when I started teaching, and has continued to be an important part of that the research that started with this project eventually turned into a presentation as well for the BIPOC Design History course, which was led by Silas Monroe and Ramon Tejada and many others. So yeah, this particular project, you know, I didn't realize how meaningful it would actually be to the work that I was doing as an educator and my scholarly activities. This is a typeface that Laura and I digitized based on a poster that we see here on the right by the Puerto Rican graphic designer Lorenzo Homar. And so we digitized letter forms. Laura turned it into a working typeface. We used it as the display face in the publication. We designed the cover of the publication itself, and then Laura actually worked to screen print it. And one of the things that I think I have really kind of taken away from this collaborative work is it really forces you to slow down and to listen. And it's a completely different thing, right, than working independently on something. And the other benefit to that, right, is that the work can grow in ways that you can't really anticipate or plan for. These are some of the digital letter forms that we were taking from some of the found ephemera and the printed materials that we were researching. And we were just, ordering things off of eBay sometimes to get access to them. There were not a lot of digital collections or archives for a lot of these materials. At least at the time, there weren't many that were very accessible. That has changed, but yeah. And then this is essentially the front and back cover opened up. What you see on the top is a facsimile of the original covers from the original publications. We essentially made copies of them, and then we wrapped those around the cover that we had designed for this publication. And that work ended up being presented at the Design History Society conference in 2021. It was also published in the proceedings, and so. Yeah, that was great to see that work take shape, and many thanks to Abby Toppins, who has been a big supporter of this project and this work. The work is also going to be included in her forthcoming Thinking Through Graphic Design History book, which is being published by Bloomsbury in the start of 2025. That work, again, as I mentioned before, was also part of the BIPOC Design History lectures that came out in 2021. And so, this allowed me to take that research a little bit further and to look at other graphic designers who weren't included in the publication that Laura and I had worked on, but instead we kind of each took our own parts and put together a presentation about this research into Puerto Rico's graphic design history, which has not really been explored that much. Some other aspects of my research that I've worked on. This one actually came out of a conversation with Heather. Heather actually and I were speaking about a book that she had read where it mentioned the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is this idea that language, right, that language can actually alter your perception of the world around you ultimately. And it made me think about the way that even though I hadn't grown up in a Spanish-speaking house, and so I really can't speak Spanish that well, I could use graphic design as a way to think about speaking Spanish, right? As a way to think about connecting with my culture. And so thinking about words here, bomba, cuatro, and primo, that have multiple meanings in Spanish, right? But also as a way to think about how I could draw attention to the colonial history in Puerto Rico. So the island of Vieques in Puerto Rico was the site of the US military bombing activity during the 20th century. But bomba is also, an Afro-Caribbean music and dance form as well, a traditional music and dance form. And so, I wanted to use typography as a way to, draw upon these different meanings of the words, as well as, again, bringing awareness to issues around Puerto Rico's history, its colonial history. And then another project which came about as a result of a call for participation was Lifted. And Lifted drew from American music books and ephemera, printed ephemera from the Jim Crow era. And for this project, I essentially lifted typography from these damaging and racist images and repurposed them as type specimens that could also speak to the kind of an incomplete, glimpse of Black lived experience here in the United States from around, the 1900s, the turn of the 20th century to today. And by taking these letter forms and using song titles from songs that had to do with revolution and protest, I created a narrative of sorts. And so I will, in the next slide, I'll show you where some of these type specimens came from. But, I do want to say that these are images that, again, are harmful and racist. And just want to give a warning before I show those images. And so they were, taken from ephemera like this that were racist and that were damaging, included harmful and damaging stereotypes. And so, yeah, so I digitized the type from a number of different sources like this, and then put them into a publication that again spoke to this kind of narrative. So on the left is a song title, Strange Fruit from Nina Simone, and on the right, This Is America by Childish Gambino. And so each of the spreads includes song titles taken from different Black artists, and then it creates a narrative of sorts throughout the pages. I'll just kind of click through here a little bit. But yeah, that was a project that I worked on, and then this work also became a series of posters, which were part of an exhibition of typography, the Typeforce exhibition in Chicago a couple of years ago as well. And one thing that I want to say here is really that this research feeds teaching. And so I teach design history, I teach typography, I work on with our seniors in their capstone courses. And I found ways, especially through the design history class, to use this research to create more inclusive, more global and non-Western units within our design history curriculum as well. Writing has also been a part of my research agenda, and for this publication about posters by Drawdown Books, if anybody knows Chris and Kathleen Sloboda, I wrote a short essay about some of their posters that they've designed over the years. And that's been, something that I think was also, unexpected, and I, hope to continue that in the future by doing more writing as well. And I'd be remiss to say that, being a part of the steering committee for the design educators community has also played an important role in my research agenda, actually, and just being exposed to more and more colleagues and the amazing work that they're doing across the country and elsewhere has really, influenced me in tremendous ways. There are a lot of folks doing really amazing work. And so I use that to say it takes a village, right? That I really, the research that I've done these past 5 years, I could not have done without these folks, my colleagues at TCNJ and in my department, Laura, Aggie, Kelly Walters, and everyone else in the Black, Brown, Latinx Design Educators book. Heather, of course, we've had a number of conversations over the years, too many to remember, about our research and things like that. My colleagues in the DEC, the BIPOC Design History and Polymode folks, and Robin Landa, who I know has been involved with design incubation, was one of my undergraduate professors, actually, and it was in her class that I first realized I even wanted to teach. And then I'm really thankful for colleagues like Ann Jordan at RIT and Ryan Bitsugayo, another VCFA alum, who actually shared their materials with me. And when she was applying to jobs, actually shared some of her CV and other teaching materials that she used. And Ryan did the same thing as I was applying for jobs. He was really, instrumental in helping me prepare for that. So all of this to say that, I had to connect the dots myself. And the way that I did that through my research agenda was realizing that DEIA is not a trend for me, that it was really embedded in my syllabi and courses that I teach, and my research and my creative work as well. That graphic design really is a liberal art, and I am in the right institution for that, where I can help students realize they can make those connections themselves between their different humanities and liberal arts classes, along with their graphic design classes. And finally, that, I had to lean into my strengths, which involved reaching out to my professional network. I'm really thankful to have such a strong network and community around me that I can use to, help our students realize, what it really looks like to be a graphic designer today, ultimately. All right, and that's it for me.
All right. Should I just start going?
Yep, DJ's up.
Well, thank you for that great talk, and thank you so much, Design Incubation, for this opportunity. When I was asked, I was like, oh my gosh, wow, I'm only in my second year of this tenure track process. And like Jason, I feel like often my research agenda is very divergent. I've been accused of being too divergent from colleagues at times. And so I think it's actually going to look pretty smooth here in this presentation because you've given me the opportunity to work on the narrative and present it in a way that makes some sense. So I guess I just say that as a disclaimer. But I call it, you got to crawl before you can walk. And this comes from, you've probably heard this term before, but I was talking to an uncle, wise uncle, and I was just telling him about how hard tenure can feel and how it can feel very easy to hide. And we're in this like peer review thing that you can't hide from. And so he just reminded me, like, just, crawl before you walk, work your way up to things. And so I think that'll be a theme of my presentation. So I'll talk briefly about my agenda, how I designed or I'm designing my agenda, my institution program, and then barriers and opportunities. So I call it an evolving research agenda because, as you can see, when I was hired in 2022, I had like 3 parts. It was a lot longer, probably some jargon, and it's gradually evolved into what I feel easier to communicate and resonates more with who I am in a lot of ways, but I'm sure this will change too. But at the moment, I say that I experiment with design's capacity to connect, include, and place people in their surrounding ecologies. And I think on a week like this week, you can see how that would be important in a country that feels awfully disconnected and polarized, and democracy can feel fraught and vulnerable. And so, again, starting small, I'm very concerned with neighborhoods, my neighborhood, neighborhoods in Cincinnati, and how people come together in those places, how they associate, how we can get them to imagine new ways of being in neighborhoods, and even connecting to the natural environment in those places. And I start to think that working at that small scale can have ripple effects largely in our democracy and elsewhere. So my work it's a bit messy in ways, and I find that working in communities is very messy. A lot of the stuff I was trained in typography, like very strong grids and all that, I still use that, but I find that I have to approach neighborhoods and communities with almost an unfinished look so that it leaves room for others to participate. And so whether that's alternative questionnaires or community bulletin boards that adapt to graffiti or adapt to expressions from the community, and not having like this like very strict scientific process all the time, learning what that means and how to do that. Community newsletter I print on a risograph and kind of experiment with workshops. Also find like reading the linguistic landscape of neighborhoods and mapping neighborhoods is very interesting, as well as sometimes collecting trash in a neighborhood and reading it that way. So it's different methods and different approaches. I have a colleague in horticulture who I partner with, and when I talk about tenure, he's like, DJ, look, I can grow an oak tree and study that, but it'll take 30 years to really see the benefits. Whereas I can grow like a tomato plant and in maybe 30 days or 60 days, I could see the benefits. And so that's helped me kind of break down, like, I don't have to worry about the oak tree right now. Like, I'll plant the seed, right? But at the moment, I find like workshops that prompt people to have a greater sense of place or belonging and agency. That's something I do. In fact, you all mentioned Silas. I got to work with Silas's class a couple days ago at Hartford and do this workshop. Or interventions in neighborhoods like nodes, which brought Wi-Fi to a small community park in my neighborhood, free Wi-Fi. And then moving on, like longer term, our school encourages grants and getting grants and things like that. And so currently working on a project that looks at community gardens, food pantries, and grocery stores and how they might be more inclusive to immigrant populations, more welcoming and accessible with culturally relevant foods, things like that. So those are just a few kind of, I guess, goals, if you will. And I'm learning to describe my work as mostly design-based inquiry and exploration. And I'm really borrowing here from Carl DeSalvo or Matthew Peterson at NC State. And I think I'll talk about this a little bit more, but being at an R1 institution, sometimes I feel tugged towards like hard science or like really evaluating the right design or, and that's all great stuff, but I don't feel that inclined. That's not where I move toward. And so I'm very interested in using design as a tool in exploratory and generative research, and often leaning into the social sciences and often bringing a participatory mindset. And when I put this together for this presentation, I was like, aha, like this feels good. I can do this. And to get there and using this idea of design-based inquiry and exploration, I really had to like investigate my own work and do a little bit of autoethnography. And so when I was applying for the job at UC or when I was working on my master's, I have a tendency to just like collect my own work or collect my journal entries or things that I was thinking and feeling and try to summarize them just like I would approach like a anthropological project. And so when I looked back at my professional work in practice, which was about 12 to 15 years doing that, was often community-centered, participatory mindset, did a lot of visual identities, which in a way feel like, I don't know, they're an interesting thing. You can't really evaluate them. I guess like you could look at market research or something like that. And then in my graduate work, I leaned into the community work and really felt like, how do we get more people to participate in the projects we work on in neighborhoods? And so I gained some ethnographic tools, critical theories, and then ultimately worked on this neighborhood center design. And these things have really influenced my current agenda. And so literally I took projects from my time in Chattanooga, my time in college, my time here in Cincinnati, working with different educators here. You could see I got to work with Matt Wazinski in graduate school, who I think has also presented here with this program, and been able to work with a lot of different people. And so organizing my work has helped me kind of see the bigger picture. And then, like Jason said, I feel very fortunate that my graduate studies has really set the trajectory for my at least like 5 years, perhaps, or 10 years. And so taking on like a big topic, so neighborhoods and how do we design more equitably and how do we hand more power to the communities and all that. Like I didn't solve any problems with this project, but I got to really become a designer in a neighborhood, doing things like showing up to the public library, working with different organizations in the neighborhood, connecting with the different gatekeepers and learning how to, a lot of it's just like sitting and having conversations. And then coming up with some rules of thumb that have guided my work since. Like many of you, I've also hopped onto like FigJam, or if you use Miro, did a bunch of mind mapping. I have like my map of the 7 years of tenure, and that was actually inspired by one of my colleagues, Emily Verba Fisher, who had done the same. And it's just like sometimes I'll be like freaking out about tenure, and I'll just come back to this. and start drawing pictures, and then I start to feel okay again. And I find that, like, again, it's like visual-based inquiry or design-based inquiry into my own practice, and finding orientation in that way. Making is a way that helps me understand where I'm going. And so when I was asked to do this, I was in the process of filling out an application for an NSF grant. Didn't get it, but it was a pretty big grant. And I found even in the process of going for this like super big engineering grant, I was still like shredding things. It was about microplastics and trying to understand visually microplastics in a different way. Or this community newsletter, which I learned how to use the RESO here. It's across the hall here at DAP, and I've been fortunate to be able to use it as much as I want. And so even just doing this once a month, it's improved my writing skills. I've learned poetry. I'm writing about nature. I'm bringing a lot of the things I'm interested in together. And it's also, again, it's like the tomato plant, because every month I get to bring my community together and understand how design can have impact in that small space. And then, like Jason said, I bring it into the classroom. I don't have time to do all the projects I want to do. So this year in my design research course, I just listed all these community partners that my students could work with and potential areas they could address. And so here we have a student that's working with a community food pantry here on campus. And then on the right, we have students working with the city of Cincinnati who they've recently, I think they're improving their planning processes. But the question was, how do we make a more like friendly, inclusive, maybe even attractive way of getting people into like zoning processes and things like that that nobody wants to participate in. And so students are working with these things, which is really cool and fun for me to see. So just like stepping back a little bit, I'm at University of Cincinnati. We're an R1 urban public university. We have this Next Lives Here mission, and we have a wonderful Office of Research that gives us a lot of support. I would say, generally speaking, University of Cincinnati wants to be like a benchmark for institutions connecting with their communities and utilizing like research that translates into the community. And so that very much aligns with what I'm doing. And so I find that when I get to apply for like internal grants and things like that, I don't feel like I'm having to like put a square in a round hole or a square peg in a round hole or something like that. So it's a really great place to be. It's a beautiful place. Within University of Cincinnati, I'm at DAP, the Pastel Palace there on the right. And we are very much training students to go into industry. And that can be interesting because my work can be sometimes speculative. It's non-commercial. It doesn't make a lot of money. And so it's interesting to influence students who may go off to say like Google or HBO, or we had a guy from Pinterest yesterday who just spoke to our students about being an art director at Pinterest. So it's interesting to bring that kind of like community based. And I want more students to work for the government. I want them to like work for their neighborhoods. I want them to work for nonprofits. So I kind of hope that my research agenda influences in that way. But that is a part of our ecosystem, is the co-op program. As far as resources, my school is very helpful. We look at tenure as 50% teaching, 30 or 40% creative scholarship, 10 to 20% service. I feel like I'm protected by the senior faculty as far as like not doing too much service. And because we teach a lot, we can get tenure because we're good educators, not just because we're good researchers. So we use, I think it's significance, effectiveness, and competence. And so when I finally go up for a promotion, I could be significant in teaching and effective in research, or vice versa. And there's some flexibility there, which is really nice. Then within the institution, college and school, I do have a startup fund, as Jason mentioned. I have a university mentor. I have a college mentor. Thanks, Jordan Tate. Thanks, Renee Seward. I have amazing collaborators. My neighbor, Mohammed Rahman, and I are working on projects together. I'm a part of a visual culture research group with Stephanie Sadre Orife over in anthropology. And then because Visible Language, a design journal, is based here, I get to be on the editorial committee, and that's a part of my service. And that's helped me a lot when it comes to research, really just seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak. which has been very interesting. And then lastly, just barriers and opportunities. I find that the course load, I only teach 5, but so it's a 3-2, but I teach 5 separate courses right now. Typography courses, research courses, introduction to design course. And it takes a lot of time and effort and rest. So when summer comes, I don't want to research. I want to just like garden. And then I feel tugged here because there's like the hard sciences and the soft sciences. And sometimes I'm confused, like, which way do I go? Like, where does design fit? And I often go back to Willem Flesser's idea that design can be a bridge between those two. And then trickery, the voices in my head telling me I'm not enough and I'm not doing enough. I'm sure you all experienced that with tenure. And I just kind of, I don't know, change that to integrating research into the classrooms, bringing my students to the community, and then really embracing the friction of art and science. And then lastly, just my mantra is let it unfold. Learn from failure, share the story no matter how small it feels. And I've been leaning into this idea of like maybe imagination can be an artifact, or like the scenarios. I think Carl DeSalvo says that scenarios can be artifacts and it can spark good things in our communities, which is enough, right? So I'll leave it at that. I think that's my last slide. So thank you.
Wow, that was amazing. Thank you. I think it's my turn. Hi, I'm Yoon Soo. And oh, shoot. I'm starting with a quote. I am I and my circumstance, and if I do not save it, I do not save myself. My grandmother raised me. She is why I am who I am. My parents were incredibly accomplished human beings, but they were also incredibly broken. So financial independence and stability outside of them were really, really important when I was young. But I also had a very deep desire to express and explore. I wanted to be a painter, a sculptor, a writer, but I couldn't reconcile this need with my other need for financial independence and stability. So then I found out about this thing called graphic design. This was in the 80s, and it was about problem solving. It was functional communication. It was facilitating the need of others. This was in South Korea, Seoul, in early 1980s. And I'm like, as a Korean woman, I was born and bred for the need of others. And so I became a designer. And I did that for a long time in South Korea and in the United States, and accidentally became a professor at Ohio University. Oh, sorry. And did multiple different kinds of investigations, like designing a typeface. But I have always been and continue to be an omnivore. So one practice I've done is I would add my omnivore tendencies into my job applications. So for example, when I applied for UMass Dartmouth, I actually included my sculptural work in my dossier. And they picked me because, in spite maybe of it, and throughout the evaluation process, I would remind them that this is why you picked me. So when I started painting, I reminded my institution that I was hired on the basis of my omnivore tendencies. So I did sculpture, I ended up doing painting, and at the same time, I have been struggling with pedagogy, specifically pedagogical damage. What is pedagogical damage? My current definition, it is a type of gatekeeping that uses shame and fear to control students. Teacher knows best. Students are empty vessels. Do as I say. How do I empower my students was my conundrum ever since I started teaching in 1995. And I learned from my colleagues, the ones who were really good educators, and I would follow them around to see how they did it. And I realized that I had to give them a voice. And this led me to creating a guide for critiques in the classroom. It was published in the, what was it? Principles of Design Principles and Practices. The cheat sheet short version is downloadable at yoonsu.com. And then COVID happened and it changed and challenged my teaching once more. I teach at UMass Dartmouth. Many students are first generation students. They have one job, maybe even two jobs, and they are not, they don't have a lot of privilege. And at the same time, I started reading this book, which was one of the most important books I read as an adult. And that led me to investigating white supremacist ideology in art and design education. And then I was awarded sabbatical for how to engage, honor, and respect the legacies of BIPOC students in our art and design education from the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth for the spring semester of 2024, which led to this lecture at Vermont College of Fine Arts in January entitled Utopianism, Good Enough, and the Grading Rubric. Here are some slides from that lecture. Utopia, an ideal commonwealth whose inhabitants exist under seemingly perfect conditions. Hence, utopian and utopianism are words used to denote visionary reform that tends to be impossibly idealistic. And I connected this to our grading rubric because our grading rubric, or my grading rubric, I think assumes this perfect condition, impossibly idealistic, that for 3 credit, you have 6 more hours per class outside of class time to do homework, to do research, which assumes that you have a room and a desk in a private space and the time to actually do all of this. And COVID kind of blew that apart. So I question, do our students live under perfect conditions? They have college, they have the job, maybe a second job, housing issues, student debt, caring for elders, mental health concerns, intergenerational trauma. And none of us live in a seemingly perfect condition. So what is our grading rubric and what is our intent versus what is the impact? If our intent was for the pursuit of excellence, but the impact is that socially, economically, physically, and or psychologically challenged students suffer the worst of the rubric, will we continue with our current practice? Can we, as educators, what can we do in our classrooms to make our intentions reconcile with the actual impact of what the students experience? This is the ultimate user experience. Never too late to change current practices for more equity and balance. And then this book also happened. I was in a faculty reading group, and the title of the book was Voices of Modernity, Language, Ideologies, and the Politics of Inequality. And in this book, I came across the concept of linguistic oppression, which led to this lecture for the Center of Art and Social Justice faculty panel at Vermont College of Fine Arts. And here are some slides from this lecture. Linguistic oppression. Language oppression is a normalized form of discrimination justified using widely held beliefs about linguistic superiority. It works in tandem with other forms of structural oppression. Because it is so normalized, it often goes unnoticed and unquestioned. Linguistic oppression, aka linguistic purism, aka linguistic protectionism. The prescriptive practice of defining or recognizing one variety of a language as being pure or intrinsically higher quality than other varieties. Like other tabooing practices, language purism seeks to constrain the linguistic behavior of individuals by identifying certain elements in a language as bad. As educators, are we gatekeepers? We practice design education as a reinforcement of hegemonic taste based on patriarchal, capitalistic, racist, Eurocentric preferences taught as a set of correct rules to abide by. This is linguistic purism. We pathologize the ugly, the poor, the non-whites, and all of the others that do not fit into the white male paradigm. And while we have come a long way in not pathologizing the feminine, we still have a long way to go. Grades are the drugs of our educational system, and I find myself being the drug dealer. It's never too late to change our current practices for more equity and balance. And just because something is difficult, it doesn't mean you are bad at it. It means we are learning something new. And when in doubt, be kind to yourself. We might not know what war you have been fighting, but you do. My goal is not to shame or blame. I'm following my curiosity with a deep love for the human condition, especially that of my students. I want to learn more, bringing light to how we got here and then to discuss where we want to go with my students, colleagues, and community. I have pedagogical damage that was inflicted upon me from parents, former teachers, and other community members. And I have a lot of grieving to do. At my most vulnerable moments, the unprocessed grief comes out as rage towards the people around me. But this rage is misguided grief. My job now is to direct this rage and grief for something that is more healthy and balanced. The way I choose to guide this grief is through love. Yes, love. Love for the human condition, our vulnerability, our stupidity, our unknowing, our over-exaggerated egos. I will let love guide me along with gentleness and joy. And I am here today to share some of this. Go. Started with Practice Joy, sabbatical smocks. Other iterations of Practice Joy. I raised chicken and quail, research moral relativism, fermentation, gratitude doodle, barn cats, Practice Joy. Practice Joy does not conform, is not contained, is resilient to ridicule and sarcasm. Thank you.
Everyone made me cry today in different ways. Thank you, Yunsu.
Thank you so much, everybody. I love this group of presentations. I am inspired. Thank you.
I'm taking a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can ask if the folks have any questions specifically, and if not, I've written down a bunch. We can also invite people into the room.
Yeah,
an
we can bring
hour
people in.
later.
Discussion.
So I forget, how do we do that, Dan? Did they ask you?
Yeah, if people would like to join and ask their questions, please just raise your hand and I will have you. I'll bring you into the room.
And
Otherwise,
come
just
into this side.
yeah. Otherwise,
Into
just
this
put your
space,
questions
yeah.
in the chat and we can ask those questions. Also indicate if you are asking somebody specific.
Yeah. I think it's fun when people come into the room.
It
but
is, yeah.
You don't have to. So,
Well, any questions?
People are being quiet.
Well, people are thinking.
I can get us started.
Yeah, I have some too.
My question is for Yoon Soo. First of all, thank you so much for that. How, like, can you give a little bit of context in terms of like your department or institution, your colleagues, like the work that you're doing? Do you get responses from them? Like, I want to know. I mean, I'm so stoked to, like, be in the same department. And I'm just curious, like, how you translate some of that work, like sparking joy, right, into maybe what some of our colleagues would want to hear or see as more practical kind of. I think I love it, and I'm curious to know what your experience has been like your feedback, I guess.
I don't get a lot of feedback. I don't know. I think a lot of the things that I say are hard asks, you know, and that's okay. And so I just follow my nose with curiosity. And the practice joy part. So I started painting in 2003, and when I had to name them, I realized I had flashbacks as I was listening to JD, and like, how do you frame it? And I remember our provost came and said, your first narrative for your promotion package has to be the best writing of your life, because only you can connect all the dots and make it make sense to everybody else in the room. And so when I was trying to figure out my painting, I realized it was about love. And I'm like, oh my God, you can't put love in a title for anything that's professional or academic. Oh my God, you're going to get crucified. But it was about love. It wasn't romantic love. It was about deep love, like for the messiness of humanity. And so I just had to name it and claim it. And it was weird. People were like, why is she not painting now? But I just kept doing it. And whenever I was going out for promotion, I would just say, because of my omnivore tendencies, now my exploration has included to this, that, and the other. And I just had to name it and claim it every juncture. Same with, my interest in pedagogy, and now like white supremacist ideology in art and design education is just such a mouthful. But the heart of it is, I think, love and deep devotion to my students, and also my lived experience of all the pain that I experienced in the name of education. So trying to unburden that. I equate it to saying, like, oh my God, dad's an alcoholic. And it's like, it doesn't change that dad's an alcoholic. It doesn't change that Thanksgiving is still going to be hard, but at least we're acknowledging the reality of what we're in. So, so I feel like I'm in a little bit of a void. I'm very grateful for Heather. This is like one of the first times somebody's like, "Oh, what's what you're doing?" I'm like, "Really? Can I just be in my room and do my little research and make little slide decks?" So anyway, I don't know if that answered your question.
Ooh, lots of questions in the chat now. I think before we get to those, I just want to acknowledge something that there was a flavor of in all three presentations that I feel is really important, which is we struggle with dealing with the structures and expectations of our institutions. But one of the reasons I still will always love art and design is I really believe it's our job to challenge the structures and systems that exist and find new ways to do research. I also, like everyone, we all like to do everything. So you want to dip your toes in the social sciences or dip your toes in painting. And I definitely believe in doing that. So and maybe that we all do it collectively. We teach the people, the other folks doing different kinds of traditional research.
If you all have any advice on navigating moving institutions pre-tenure. I'm on my 4th year of being full-time in academia. I'm just now on my 1st year tenure track. I was previously a professor of practice for 3 years. I'm afraid of going to another institution after my 1st or 2nd year of tenure track because it may not look good on my CV.
I just one thing I'd like to point out, it is probably better for you to consider moving now than should you not get tenure, because that potentially would show a gap. Where if you're, at your 7th year and then suddenly you're moving, people might wonder what's going on. So I would encourage you, if you're finding that you're interested in other things, now is not a terrible time to consider that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Go early if you're gonna try to switch. It gets harder to switch once you've been there for a few years.
Vic, are you saying you're on your 2nd year? You can negotiate for credit too, even credit from your professor of practice time. I was able to do that at DePaul from being a term full-time faculty. If you're producing research and value in the field, then everything is negotiable to some degree. So yeah, and I know some folks are feeling like they want to move states or institutions based on everything that's happening, and that's totally understandable. So I think do what's right for you. I mean, for our panelists who spoke today, do you have any wisdom there?
I remember in 2000, I was applying for tenure at Ohio University. And just to be safe, I applied to a bunch of jobs at the same time so that if I didn't get tenure, I would have other job options. And I ended up getting tenure and getting 2 job offers. And it was a great kind of experience I left my tenured position and I came to UMass Dartmouth without tenure. But it was very empowering. And I came to the East Coast because I wanted to be in a different region, although I loved being in Ohio. So you can move laterally. I have seen other people move laterally with tenure. It's always negotiable. I think if you are actively engaged, basically tenure means when you are looking to move, people want to actually give you tenure. So when you're talking about your research, they want to see the long arc. It's like, oh, this has juice and it can go for the next 3 to 5 years and it's not going to peter out. And so that's the case that you're making for yourself. And if that is very robust and strong, then you can move laterally. That's been my experience and observation.
We got a lot of questions. So Allison, I was just responding in the chat, but I'll read the question. To all the panelists, I am now wondering how your grading rubrics have changed from maybe how we were taught in design school into how you assess students now and be more inclusive to those underprivileged students. I think obviously Yoon touched on this in the talk. I'm very much in line with that. I don't really believe in grades at all. So I'm personally sure I'm breaking tons of rules. It's just not, anyway. So folks, Jason, DJ, do you have any thoughts on that too?
Yeah, sure. I actually wanted to learn more about Yeonsu's process and where you're landing on rubrics. Personally, for me, as I've taught, I've just found like the rubric can be a real point of contention with students. Either it's not clear or it's like almost too clear and then it gets confusing. And so I didn't really speak to this, but I find that part of my research is figuring out what the heck to do with rubrics. And I'm always playing with them. And I teach a lot of first year students who they get into our university because they have good grades, not because of a portfolio. And so the grade is the, what was it, the drug or the opiate or whatever you call it. And so our first year students are very much like worried if they get an A minus. And it's like, whoa, an A minus is, I want an A minus. Like, but so I've been really like, I try to be as transparent as possible now with my rubrics. And I even sometimes share them with the students and say, what needs to change? Like, what doesn't make sense? And then even as I'm working with like studio time, making sure they have time in class to work on things and ask questions, as opposed, like some of my students do have jobs, and so it feels like the rubrics is like system thing. It's like not just the rubric, it's also like how I set up an assignment. It's how like the documentation of the assignment. I have them self-evaluate against the rubric now too, so that they're like, I understand if they don't understand something, and we can go back and they can resubmit and all this different stuff. And then the last thing I'll just say about it is I've had a change in my mentality a lot. We work a lot with our embedded counselor here, and she's always reminding us that our students today aren't the same students as 20 years ago. And I mean, there's a lot going on. And in some ways, our students aren't ready for college. And so they're diving into this like big place. We have like 50,000 students here. And it's like every year there's more and more. And it's just a lot of these kids don't grow up in a city, and they're like navigating that. And so I've just had to really change my expectations. And I find this year, like I love teaching first year students now. And I think part of it is like changing the rubric, changing my expectations, changing the culture of the classroom. And those are, I don't know. I guess that's all I'll say about that for now. So it's always changing, to their question.
I know we could probably talk about this all day. Did you want to say something, Yoon Soo? I can move on to the
Sure.
next question.
The two things that you can Google, one is ungrading and the other is labor-based contract grading. One thing that I treat it as pass-fail for all my grades. So if they show up and do the work, they get an A. And I tell them that first day of classes. Like Brown University, the medical school, is doing all pass fail. I tell them if I need a brain surgery tomorrow, the surgeon, she just has to know enough. She goes through pass fail. And I don't understand why designers like DJ, you were talking about stuck in between the hard sciences. The hard sciences getting rid of grades. Harvard Medical School is saying, we don't need you guys to compete. So in order to create community, we're going to get rid of grades so you learn from each other and not be cutthroat. I'm like, why are we grading? It doesn't make any sense. This is why, like, I get, so I treat it, the NETCHI, all the accreditation doesn't allow for many institutions to pass fail, but they can't tell me that I can't treat it as pass fail. So I say, this is your life. You're getting something out of this. You're getting a portfolio out of this. And I will not judge you if you want to go work at Walmart versus Target. The Target students usually get an A, the Walmart students get a B, and I will refuse to do that. So the story I tell is, let's say you just met me and it's like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm a writer. It's like, oh, what was your last project? Oh, I wrote the manual for the Honda CRV. And you're like, ooh, why did she even call herself a writer? So you're questioning my judgment. And then but the project before that was a book of poetry. So what that is gatekeeping, and it's putting value on what I think is better. And I'm saying, I'm not going to do that. I do that, but I'm not going to do that in this classroom. And I respect the labor that you do. And we can still discuss it. And if your goal is to work wherever the destination is, we will talk about the appropriateness of that destination and what you're making, but I will not judge you for what your goals are. So that's how I simplified my grading.
I'm going to move on to another question from John in the chat. Question: how do you hold yourself accountable towards making progress, in quotation marks, on a daily, weekly, or whatever basis? I think we could all probably weigh in on things that work and don't work. But to our panelists, would any of you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, like Heather said in the chat earlier, right? The pressure sometimes of something is a great motivator. A deadline, right, is a great motivator. No, but I like you have to carve time out. It has to be important to you. You have to have people who support you as well. So I'm a father of 4, right? And our family life is bananas. And but I have to just make sure that there are days of the week that I can focus on, of course, all of the normal responsibilities of prepping for a class and grading and all that stuff, but also just sitting down to write something, sitting down to finish a project that I haven't been able to work on for 2 weeks, right? So it takes just blocking off, chunks of time in my schedule. Usually for me, if I can block off a chunk of time and just say like busy, then it's like reminding, it helps remind me that I need to use that time wisely. Things always come up, but just making sure that you have a supportive network. And I've had to learn to say no to a lot of things. I get and asked to be on a committee. Oh, that actually sounds really kind of interesting, but oh my gosh, I'm already on 2 right now, and I know that I just can't make that work. So yeah, it's I think it's an ongoing problem. Like it'll just always kind of be a problem, and trying to carve out that time.
Yeah, I'm really influenced by, there's a writer, Cal Newport, and he talks about deep work and shallow work, and like knowing when I can do deep work and when I can do shallow work and protecting the deep work time. And so like the deep work would be the writing, the shallow work's the emails. And knowing when like I just need, sometimes I'm not really an extrovert, but I like people a lot. And so even just knowing when I need to be around people to inspire me and to be like share ideas and have like a lunch so that I can get into that deep work. And then the other thing that he often talks about is just, I have an ongoing list of like, what are my service, what are my scholarship stuff, what are my teaching stuff. And then I put dates next to it. And then I put it in the calendar so that I have a tendency to worry about things if they're not in my calendar. And if I know there's time to work on it, even if it's 2 weeks from now, usually it's not that far advanced, but even if it's like 2 days from now, um, I can kind of go to bed easier. And I can also, I think to Jason's point, like when somebody says, can you join a committee? I'll be like, well, I don't have any time. Like, I literally can't join a committee. Like, I literally want to, but I literally can't. And so that's what I do. It works sometimes, but it's evolving, like my research agenda.
Yeah, I think that's why I like collaborative work, people who keep me accountable. Or like Jason was saying, we text ideas to each other, and we haven't recently. I guess we're overdue. But also I had this terrible habit of applying to everything that looks interesting. And if I get in, then I do the work because there's pressure. But it is true, you have to know yourself. Either you're organized or you're not. You need pressure, you don't. The deep time, like I can only write and have good thoughts in the morning, and the afternoon is forget it. So, right, knowing yourself, I think too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do have to know when you're able to do the kind of work that you want to do. Like if late night is your thing, then that's when you block out that time. But I found writing groups to be super helpful to keep everybody on track, whether it's a writing group or just a group of colleagues that meet up to keep each other on track. It helps if someone's like, oh yeah, so how far you gone on that? And someone else to check in. Like
Jess, you just did that for me recently. It was, I had to say no, make a decision.
Yes.
And you did. You texted me in the morning. You were like, did you make that decision? I didn't actually.
It was a Monday morning. I'm like, have you done this yet?
And I had not. I did do it though a few days later. Anyway. All right, let's see. We just have a couple more.
Yeah.
From Silky. Hi, it's so good to see you. You can come in the room if you want. No one wanted to come in today. She says, when you are doing personal research on design, no client, no audience, nothing, how do you go about sharing this or expanding this conversation with others? That's a great question.
Any,
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, any
Somebody want to go?
panelists want to take that on? Jason, you
Yeah,
got.
go for it, Jason.
To me, this is where it's really important that it's something you're interested in, that it's something that you're really like what are the things that if you if you had some sort of, I don't know, captive audience, or you're right, like some platform that you would want to say, right? To me, this is incredibly scary. I think for most of my education, I felt like I was one of those people who didn't have something important or valuable to say.
Me too.
And then I think eventually you find something. There's something that stirs, within you, right? There's some interest, passion, cause, person, right? That helps, right? And so, something that maybe inspires you. I don't know, something that you disagree with. Sometimes I ask my students, when I give them assignments, if it's a reading assignment too, like, what do you hate about this? What do you disagree with? Right? They might not connect to something, but they might feel really strongly against something, right? So I think that I would use those kinds of things as an opportunity to create that kind of work. And then I think that gives you, I hopefully that gives you a place like from where you can share that work. It gives you some sort of context, right? To begin making that work from, and then hopefully sharing it. And there is a little bit of, it's hard for graphic designers, especially. Well, I'll speak for myself. It's been hard for me to learn how to promote myself over time. And then I got comfortable doing it as a graphic designer, and then I had to figure out how to do it as an educator, and that was really weird. But you have to do that. You have to be willing to say, okay, I have something to say. I have, I want to contribute to this conversation, or have a different perspective on that, right? And so it's really a matter of like figuring out what that is, I think.
I don't know if this exactly answers the question, because it's hard for me to think of a time when I'm designing without thinking about others in a sense. Like, I mean, there's definitely like collaging or like things I don't show people that I might just do like as a journal or whatever. But I think the thing that may relate, and if it doesn't, I apologize, is this neighborhood newsletter. And nobody asked me to do it. It wasn't like, I don't have a grant. I don't have like a client. I just I wanted to do it for my thesis, but my committee thought it wasn't a great idea. Like they thought it was okay, but I needed to connect to the bigger neighborhood, not just my block, which it's literally just 25 houses. And so one day I was just like, I'm gonna make it about nature because I like to garden. I have chickens like Yoon, and I want to talk about nature and the seasons. And so literally I just did it. And then I put it in, well, you can't put it in mailboxes, but I put it on like doorsteps, and it's like 9 months later, and it just keeps evolving. And so I don't know. It felt awkward though at first, and even my neighbors think it's strange to some extent, but I think they're happy to be a part of it.
That's great. Jason, I think you need to get chickens now too, or maybe you already have them.
I want chickens.
I knew it.
We have foxes. We have foxes though, like right behind our property. I don't know.
I just wanted to say to Sulky, I'm not sure if what you meant was like, how do I, without an audience, without a client, and I'm building these, I have these ideas and I want to talk, or you're talking about then how do I disseminate it? How do I share it? Maybe you meant both things. And so hopefully we answered your question, but you can always email me separately too. Did somebody who crashed out? I can't figure out who. Oh, Jess. Somebody fell off the Zoom. Okay, let me just see. We have Noah. Hi, Noah. We just have a couple more questions. What methods have you found successful for organizing early stage research, notes, books, marginalia? I don't even know how to say that word. But so we just actually, ironically, had some or serendipitously had some comments in the chat. Does anyone have any other tips or apps or things maybe to add to answer Noah's question? We've got Pomodoro. We've got to-do list apps. I know a lot of people use Notion, Big Jam, Miro, right?
I use Arena.
Oh yeah, Arena is great. I use
For
that too.
bookmarking, and I'm one of those like Safari users who doesn't like to use Chrome really. So I love tab groups within
Oh.
Safari. So it allows me to label groups. So like I have one specifically for research when I was getting all my tenure stuff together and I had 500 Google Docs open. I could just keep them all open in the tab group without having to see all of my tabs. But I'm sure there's a ton of other things out there that I'm forgetting, but
Hi, Omar. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I'll try to save this chat and tabulate all these resources that people have added, which is great. Jason, I was hoping you were going to say you just left 100 tabs open all the time like I do.
well,
Unfortunately, that is not what you said.
no, basically they are, but they're like hidden kind of.
Yeah, that
list,
sounds good.
You know.
Yeah, I need that. Oh, maybe we did get all the questions. Yeah, I think so. If I didn't answer someone's question, please tell me now in the chat because we're about time. Dan, did Jess have to go teach? Do you know where she went? Did she text us? Oh, okay.
Yes, yes, she had to
Yeah.
leave.
I missed that. I'm trying not to look at my phone. It keeps screaming at me. Any other thoughts, questions? This has been like such an inspiring and wonderful conversation. I learned so much from everybody and my heart feels really full, which is nice for this week, I think. I also just, for the 3 panelists and anyone who is in the room, please don't be shy about reaching out to us if you're interested. If you need a CV line and you want to share your work, you know someone who would love this opportunity and they have a really interesting path. We might not get them in right away, but we really try to be mindful, especially of those. Just do not be shy. I think a lot of people have said that the pressure of having to write a talk for this event has helped them frame their research too. So there is something for the procrastinators out there, maybe to, make things ready. So tab groups.
Yeah, I would do this right
Yeah.
before a reappointment or before.
Yeah.
I still
Right
have a
before
year
your
till my next
formal
one,
review.
but this would have been really helpful last year. Yeah.
Will be good for the big one in the middle,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. So it's great.
If I could
Wanna-
pose a question to everybody, the audience and the panel, to consider as we leave this event, what are the underlying similarities and consistencies within the discipline and across institutions? Basically, what I'm saying is there are so many different institutions and their
Yeah.
focus are different and their expectations are different. And then there's also such a variety of research going on out there, but we are all one discipline. And in so many other disciplines, there is this understanding of what the discipline is about. And so to try and circle back, if we could all think about, well, what makes us all part of this same discipline? And not to necessarily answer today, but to think about and either share back with us or come and we can discuss it again.
Yeah, that question gets harder every year, doesn't it? Like, who are we? Why are we here? Yeah.
Well, thank you all for coming today, and thank you very much to the panelists and to my colleagues at Design Incubation for coming today. It's to have you all here.
Thank you. It was
Thank
great,
you.
everybody.
I'm gonna stay on for a few while everyone leaves. Oh,
Sounds
hi,
great.
Danelle. I didn't realize she was there too.
And this will be this has been recorded and it will be posted to YouTube in due time.
Yay. That's great.
Cool.
Very cool.
Thanks, everyone.